Story 1. Walking right past the people in malls who try to get your attention with their face creams and flat irons. Story 2. I cut telemarketers and door-to-door salespeople short. They will not stop talking unless you cut them off, and I do not want what they are selling. Story 3. When I told a story and someone immediately shared a similar experience, I used to feel they were one-upping me or redirecting attention to themselves. Now I understand that most of the time they are simply trying to show that they can relate. Story 4. State your boundaries firmly in clear, direct terms. Some people won't get it otherwise. Story 5. Not replying right away to texts or phone calls used to bother me. I expected immediate responses and got upset if someone was online but did not reply. I always replied instantly no matter what I was doing. As I have aged, I have learned that you do not need to be always connected. You are allowed to be off. Story 6. I like the answers here. With age, I have realized that if I am about to date someone, I need to say upfront what my deal breakers are. For example, I will not date someone who smokes cigarettes or someone who has children. I say it right up front. Even if we are getting along well, I will end it there. I can still be friends with the person, but I make it crystal clear that there will be no romance. In the past, I would think we could make it work, but it never did. Story 7. Leaving a party without saying goodbye used to seem rude, but now I totally get the Irish exit. Sometimes you are just socially drained and do not have the energy for a 20-minute goodbye tour. Story 8. My parents and grandparents always told us it was rude to stack plates and cups to clean up the table at a restaurant, and that it was offensive to servers. I now stack everything to make it as easy as possible for servers. Story 9. Forgive me. I was wrong. In the past, when someone was recuperating in the hospital, I might hear that they had asked for no visitors or phone calls, but that cards were appreciated. That should be obvious to most people, but I thought it rude. I assumed no one expects you to look or feel your best, and I was just going to drop off flowers. Now I see the light. I stayed with my mother for 2 days and nights while she was hospitalized. I was so afraid of losing her that I refused to take more than 10 steps out of her room. Keeping up with nurses, doctors, and medical advice was a full-time job, and getting any rest while staying in the room with her was impossible. Family who had been occasional guests at my mother's home camped out for hours in her very small hospital room. It was hard for my mother to communicate with visitors and difficult for me to speak with healthcare providers in private or for them to do their jobs with visitors standing around. I will never again feel anything but admiration for those who make it clear that they or their loved ones are ill, tired, and need the care only a hospital can provide. In the future, I will send cards to the hospital, send flowers to their home once they leave, and, if they do want visitors at the hospital, limit my time there to 10 to 15 minutes. Everyone needs encouragement, but there is a time and a place for everything. I get it now. Story 10. Not attending a hangout or an event and explaining that you simply do not want to is a perfectly valid explanation. Story 11. I ignore homeless people who try to talk to me. This may seem heartless, but when someone who sounds intoxicated or under the influence of drugs starts shouting to get my attention while I am trying to go to work, I do not engage with them. Story 12. Immediately say, "No, thank you," to someone trying to convert me to their faith. Story 13. Not answering calls right away used to make me think someone was ignoring me. Now I realize people have lives, experience anxiety, or simply need mental quiet. Not everything requires an immediate response. Story 14. I will not answer the front door when I am home alone, even if my car is there. If I am not expecting you and you did not call first, screw you. Story 15. Not answering the door. I sometimes work by my front window, and people walk past to get to the door. Usually it is my neighbor or the postal worker. If it is not, it is charity workers or missionaries. I do not answer the door for them. Story 16. When restaurants turn you away in a matter-of-fact manner because they are closed. Story 17. Saying no without an explanation. Boundaries aren't rude, they're healthy. Story 18. When a child has a tantrum in public, parents remaining calm and minimally responsive can help. Yelling and reacting makes it so much worse and can encourage the behavior. It is easy for a parent to panic and freeze in that situation. This does not mean allowing your child to behave badly or run amok. It means trying to de-escalate the situation. Story 19. I just hang up on telemarketers. I wasn't going to buy anything from them anyway, so it saves time for both of us. Story 20. Celebrities often brush off fans who try to express admiration or ask for autographs. I understand that it feels rude to the fan on the receiving end, and it can be if you are approached like that once a month or once a year. But if it happens 20 times a day or more every single day, it is understandable that it becomes draining and you may not feel like being polite to everyone. That is why some celebrities may seem rude or spend 95% of their time hiding away and sending assistants to run errands. Story 21. Once, I was walking my dog when the doggy bag had a hole and I got feces on my hands. I am germophobic. Some Mormon missionaries approached me. I told them politely that I needed to go home to wash my hands, but they kept talking and followed me for several blocks. I eventually yelled loudly at them. I do not care anymore. If someone approaches me about religion, I will yell. Story 22. I stop panhandlers in mid-sentence. They launch into a story about losing their wallet and needing bus fare, and I tell them that they are going to ask me for money and I am not going to give them anything, so they should stop wasting both our time and find someone else to talk to. That usually stops them. They look confused for a second and then move on. Story 23. Lawyers who interrupt. I know what information I need, and it is not always what you want to tell me. Story 24. Setting boundaries. Not responding to obvious manipulation attempts, such as sobbing or threats of suicide. Saying no to others. Story 25. I tell people who ask invasive questions to fuck off. I used to feel obliged to explain myself when strangers asked about my disability, but now I realize they have no right to that information. Asking strangers about that out of the blue is extremely rude. Generally, I ask whether they ask everyone they meet for their medical history. It is 50-50 whether that makes them think. Story 26. I thought it was rude not to smile at someone. Now I get it. Resting bitch face for the win. Story 27. Why waste their time when you know there is absolutely no way you are going to buy? It would be rude to engage when you have no intention. Story 28. I used to make excuses when calling in sick. Now I simply say I am unwell and do not elaborate. I also do not explain if my workplace wants to change my schedule or ask me to come in outside my scheduled hours. If pressed, I say I have plans. My plan is to stay home and not go to work. I'm joking. I do not try to help or listen to people who talk in circles and will not hear what you are saying. It is one thing to need to rant, but this is just wallowing in a mud puddle and then wondering why you are covered in dirt. I no longer entertain it. Story 29. I don't answer phone calls but reply by message. Now I understand that it's simply more comfortable and avoids disturbing people around me. Story 30. Everything women do in the gym to avoid being approached or harassed, even if it might be perceived as rude, is justified. Story 31. Just leaving. A party, a conversation, or a relationship. It still hurts when someone does that to me. Usually they say there is no particular reason, just because. Still, it is important to protect your peace. I get it now. Story 32. Be direct. The world is hostile, and everyone wants something from you. Saying no explicitly can make you seem like a monster to some. Story 33. Telling parents to keep their children under control and make them behave when they are too loud, excitable, or disruptive. I used to think that was rude when I was a child, but as an adult I completely understand and wish more people would speak up and encourage parents to take responsibility. Story 34. I learned to set my iPhone to only ring for numbers in my contacts. I still get a notification when other numbers call. If they are leaving a voicemail, I can read what they are saying and choose to pick up. Before that, my go-to response to telemarketers was, "Please take me off your call list." Sometimes it took multiple repetitions, but they are not supposed to ignore it, and it usually shuts them down right away. Story 35. It is okay to decline something offered with good intentions. I was hopelessly codependent and thought it was my job to manage everyone's emotions. I could not tolerate anyone being even slightly disappointed. especially when they were just being nice. But just because something comes from a good place does not mean you have to suppress your discomfort and accept it. Story 36. I don't force myself to be nice to pushy people in my direct messages. Once I realize they are being pushy, I also no longer consider it rude to be blunt, ask what people want when they message me, and refuse to engage until they answer. Story 37. I work 12-hour shifts. Sometimes it is okay to ignore people you are on good terms with. We are all tired and just want to get through the day. There is no need to start a conversation every time we pass each other. Story 38. Telling people to quiet down, lowering the volume, asking other people to control their children at events, not bothering to smile or say good morning or goodbye, not replying to messages. The list goes on, and the sad part is I am only 29. Story 39. Get off my lawn. As a child, I thought it was rude, but now that I'm over 40, I mean it. Story 40. Walking away in the middle of a conversation, especially after being interrupted, shows that you do not want to hear what I have to say. Okay, goodbye. Story 41. Affirm no as an answer without any explanation. When I do this and people ask why, I reply that no is a complete sentence. We do not owe anyone an explanation for this. We may want to understand, but understanding is not a right. It is a privilege. Many of us take this for granted. Story 42. When I was a kid, I used to think those child leash backpacks were horrific and inhumane. As an adult who worked with children for years, I completely understand now. Story 43. Everything about the behavior of Squidward is 100% relatable after you grow up. Story 44. It is okay to say no and stick to your decision when that is what you truly mean. Story 45. Hanging up the phone immediately after saying goodbye instead of waiting for the other person to reply. I always thought movies from the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s were rude when people would say see you at 8 and then place the receiver on the cradle without a goodbye. I am on the phone with many people at work, and the older folks know how to exit a conversation. Anyone younger than 60 often does an annoying round of okay. Thanks, have a nice day, you too, bye. Story 46. I stopped holding the door for people behind me in public. I did it for many years, but since the coronavirus pandemic, too many people have walked through with their hands in their pockets or looking at their phones instead of taking the door. They were simply using me as a personal door holder. Sometimes 2 or 3 people would enter while I stood holding the door. Now I do not check whether someone is behind me. I push the door for myself and keep walking. Story 47. Someone is acting as if I am hitting on them when I am not. It is not about me or perceived rejection. It is about their loyalty to their relationship and their desire to be cautious. I can clarify that I was not hitting on them and leave it at that. Story 48. Leaving a social situation without announcing your departure or saying goodbye to anyone. Story 49. At first I thought people who talk too much were rude. Later I realized that sometimes I don't want to talk, so when people talk a lot it's okay because I don't have to respond and they understand. Story 50. No is a complete sentence without an explanation. I now understand that. It is very liberating. Story 51. Not answering or opening the door just because someone knocks. Story 52. Saying no without elaborate explanations and protecting your time are not mean. They are necessary. Story 53. Just because the phone rings or someone knocks does not mean it needs to be answered. The problem on the other side will still be there when you get to it. Story 54. Some patients visit the emergency room very frequently, even more often than I do, and I work there full time. When they seek attention rather than medical care, there is often nothing I can do to help. They need to take responsibility and avoid abusing the medical system. Sometimes staff are perceived as lazy or rude, but in some cases patients improve when clinicians limit attention for non-urgent demands. They may be seeking attention rather than treatment, and the emergency room is not the place for that. Story 55. Hanging up in someone's face or walking away mid-conversation. Story 56. Arriving 10 or so minutes late to a party used to seem rude. Now I understand it gives the host a little extra time to prepare or relax beforehand. Story 57. A crying baby in a restaurant can start suddenly, and there is often nothing you can do except leave, which is the polite option after a few minutes. Story 58. Not letting your children eat all kinds of junk food at birthday parties. Story 59. I'm a grumpy old person now. Life beats you down with its bullshit. People are garbage. I'm tired. It's not personal. It's just who I am now. Story 60. Most autistic behaviors were labeled as rude. Story 61. We have a no soliciting sign on our door and a door with a small window. People still knock on the window. I open it, ask if they can read, and point to the large sign. Then I close the window, walk away, and call the police. We have a law here that if the sign is present, they may not disturb the homeowner. Story 62. I dislike the people who say coffee, black, when ordering at coffee shops. Working in the service industry made me hate them less because I also do not want to interact with others. And I appreciate that they keep it short and move away from me. Story 63. I used to work in hospitality when I was 17. During one shift, a man had an argument with the manager, went on his break and walked out. At the time I was angry with him and thought he had let us all down, but looking back he was completely right. Story 64. Earlier today, while being held hostage at the Target checkout by a well-meaning young Christian woman, I had to say, "Thank you for sharing your story." She kept telling me how she found Jesus. Saying thank you was the kindest way I could decline without being a complete jerk. I used to think people who offered dead-end lines like this were rude. They are clearly doing their best to be polite while saying, "I do not want to hear any more." Edit to add. Not smiling at strangers or acknowledging random people. I have relocated across the country. It is not the South. We do not say hi or answer random people. Respect for another person's privacy in the city means keeping to yourself. If someone is talking to you and you do not know them, you rarely want to know why. It is safer to keep walking unless I hear an accent or see fresh out-of-state license plates from back home. Those people are just new and will, unfortunately, learn not to be so nice soon enough. Story 65. Not offering your seat on public transportation. I offered my seat to an elderly gentleman and he screamed abuse at me, accusing me of implying he was old and decrepit and even asking if I wanted to take it outside. I was a young woman. Story 66. I am not shaking hands. I am 100% on board with that. Most of the people who have offered me their hands in the last few years seem very off. Laughing out loud. Story 67. I do not engage with homeless people or salespeople. They are the same. They want something from me and I want nothing from them. Story 68. Just telling people you are done talking or do not have anything else to say to end a conversation. Story 69. Telling people who ask invasive questions to leave me alone. Gold. Story 70. I drove slowly at the speed limit and turned extra carefully. The first journey from the hospital back home was one of the most cautious drives I have ever taken. You never know what others are going through. Story 71. Gatekeeping. I've seen why it's so important to protect certain spaces from others. Story 72. When I was younger, I thought people canceling plans at the last minute were flaky. Now I realize sometimes you are just mentally exhausted and need a night of silence more than socializing. Story 73. Wearing a vest and loitering outside swanky establishments to obtain people's car keys. Story 74. I used to think it was rude to fly with crying, stinky babies. I still do. Story 75. Ask a waiter to stop clearing plates until everyone is finished. Waiters think they are being helpful, but they are not. Story 76. Telling someone that you do not feel like talking to them. Story 77. Being upset is normal. I remember that when I was upset with someone, I used to feel like I was a bad person. Then I realized that feeling that way is natural and healthy, and as long as I did not act on it, I was not doing anything wrong. Story 78. Telling people in the subway not to stand in front of the door and to let others in when there is plenty of room for everyone. Story 79. Defecating in a public restroom stall while others are using the facilities. We are all here for the same reason, and I do not need to wait until you leave to be polite. Story 80. Be clear. If you do not want to attend a get-together or similar event, just say so. It is better to be honest than to create an expectation and then not fulfill it later. Story 81. Something my husband and I call posh person walking off. When we moved to a particularly wealthy area of the country, we noticed that the very rich would just walk off mid-conversation, or what we thought was a conversation, when they had enough. We laughed about it and thought it was brilliantly rude. Now we do it. Story 82. I prefer to use a different straw. I do not want to drink from the same straw that someone else has put their lips on. Story 83. I ignore people on the streets who are begging for money. I know I'll catch hell for this, but I don't care. You spend hours outside only to earn about $50 when you could punch a clock like I do. It's okay to ignore them. Story 84. I once asked a Salvation Army bell-ringing Santa Claus in the United States to please stop ringing the bell so I could enter a store. It was extremely loud. Story 85. Not replying to texts right away used to put me off. I thought it meant someone didn't care, but now I understand people are juggling work, brain fog, and many other things. Accusing them of not caring is unfair. I learned this the hard way recently. Story 86. Staring at your phone all day, even when you are with other people. Story 87. Some cultures have loud people, and I have seen others critique them or call them rude. They are not rude. They simply consider being bolder and more openly friendly to be natural, as it should be. Story 88. Driving past cars waiting in a single lane to reach the front of the zipper merge. Story 89. Urinating on the street when you really have to and there is no public toilet available. Story 90. Maaari bang maging malapit ang estudyante at guro? O kailan ba na mukhang nasa yugto pa lamang ng pakikipagkilala sila? Story 91. Bringing a child under 3 years old on a plane. Laughing out loud, just kidding. You people are evil. Keep your kids off flights. It will not kill you to avoid traveling for 3 years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.